witnessing the amount of deception that's going on in the world. And I tie that back to, biblically speaking, Satan, and he's basically the father of lies, the great deceiver. And so you look at Satan's tactics. He likes to put people in high places that are going to do his bidding. And so I think we live in a world where you're looking at that kind of play out. And so the deceptions are coming top down. And it's more and more evident to me. And the way that God kind of wired me up is to be somebody who's kind of relentlessly pursuing the truth and finding the deception and shining light on it. And I don't expect everybody to have that drive. I think when I sit down and I think about reaching people for Christ or the gospel message, I always tend to think, how can I reach, 5 million people? Meanwhile, my wife is like, helping somebody that's there right in front of her that I'm not seeing because I'm thinking about but we need both types of people. If you understand what I mean, you need those people who are making big plans and things. And then you need like the people who are ministering that are really good at ministering and loving on the real actual people that are in front of them. And that's not to say that I don't love helping individual people too. I do. It's just the way my mind tends to go is on bigger ideas.
Mark, thanks for joining me. I appreciate you taking time out of your, I'm assuming, busy schedule to have a conversation about what's going on over there at the Old State Saloon.
Yeah, glad to. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So we were all introduced to you. You came on the scene big in June with your Heterosexual Awesomeness Month. Do you think there's anyone in the world that doesn't know about what you're doing there at Old State Saloon at this point?
No, I do run into a few people that have no idea. And somebody pointed out yesterday, actually, that they don't think that, mainstream news covered it very well, like NBC, CNN type places. But you saw it a lot on social media, and then you saw it a lot on independent news and independents like yourself, covering it. So the people that are stuck on the mainstream, they don't know anything about it.
So some people still, because I saw, the NBC piece, but some people who haven't got off onto those alternative media channels or independent, you're finding they didn't know about what you're doing there.
Yeah, that's what we kind of noticed, I guess a correlation between the people who didn't know tend to be a little bit more of the mainstream news watchers that are not, they're not online getting their news, basically.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I caught the NBC piece. How did they reach out to you? Talk about that. I mean, that's big time. That's the big stage right there.
I don't even remember, like, NBC. I don't know which one you're talking about. If it was that the interview.
So a number of them reached out, then it sounds like.
Right. And so then I also was interviewed, and then what I was interviewed by somebody would be distributed to the other networks and they use them. So, and I don't know the details of, all those distribution channels and how they get access and footage, or if they request it or what. But that one interview that where they came to the bar and interviewed me at the bar, that made the rounds for sure, because it just was one of those pieces that got distributed.
Okay, gotcha. So you were being, I'm assuming you have been on other independent content creator and investigative journalist shows since. I've seen you in various places.
Yeah, a few. It's been quiet lately. There's people have reached out to follow up, and I have just been going through a lot of stuff since then. So I haven't really had the time or really kind of wanted to jump on and talk about much until today. So.
Well, and that, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's what I want to talk about is, I want to touch on your experience in California. I want to touch on why you decided to do this in June. Let's start with your California experience. I know that you spent, how many years did you live in California?
Uh, 40.
Okay, so you're yeah, that you know the reason I find people from California fascinating is because I look at California and New York and Washington, Seattle as we know these trends start on the coasts in those cities and move into the inner states, and I'm endlessly fascinated to find out what your experience was like as a California, the message you can give to Americans that aren't aware of how it's like down there. Um, what's it like living in California contrasted to living in Idaho?
Okay, and so this is actually interesting you bring this up because just yesterday I was in contact with somebody from France, a news agency from France, and they're doing a story about people migrating from the blue cities of the west coast of the United States to Idaho. And so they're going to come out and
Wow.
do a film it and do a story and everything. And they're super interested in, what happened with me moving from California to Idaho and then getting involved with the things that I got involved with. So it is an interesting story that people are picking up on. You don't people. I think the world tends to push us in a direction of these highly populated areas. And there's a lot of like theories on why that is, and it's easier to control people when you have them all together and things like that. But I think people are starting to recognize that, and they're saying, "Hey, look, I want some breathing room. I want to be able to not have the thumb of the government down on me at all times, and I want to be able to grow my own crops and food and have a cow and those types of things." And that's just not going to happen in San Francisco. So,
Yeah.
um, for me, I always, even at a young age, I kind of felt like it wasn't, California living and big city living wasn't really what God was calling me to. I just didn't like it. I don't like the politics involved. There's just too many people in one spot. Um, and so, but I was like, I was a little strange. In sixth grade, I remember reading Rush Limbaugh's book, The Way Things Ought to Be in sixth grade, which is kind of that's not normal.
Yeah, your friends weren't reading those kind of books. Is that what you're saying?
No, no.
Mm.
But yeah, so I mean, that's where my life was. I've been in Idaho 6.5 years. So in California, I was a police officer for 15 years. And then I had side businesses because I was kind of an entrepreneurial, or I am an entrepreneurial guy. And eventually left the police work to dive into, my businesses full time. When one of those businesses or the main business pretty much collapsed due to the fluctuation of the dollar versus the yen of all things,
Mm.
I had to lay a bunch of people off and kind of sort of close up that business as far as its like brick and mortar part of it. And it really freed me up to, consider where to regrow whatever I was going to do in the future. And that's where I started really putting a case together for my wife to try to convince her that Idaho was the place. I had friends that had retired and moved here, and other folks that had moved here, not retired, and just took their families and moved here. And
Hmm.
so my wife here, we checked it out and we really, really liked it. But she didn't want to move. All the relationships and our involvement with church and things back home and family. So we just decided to pray about it for a while. And then after about 3 or 4 months, the church that we were attending back there announced that they're planting a church in Boise, Idaho, of all places. So
Wow.
we had already been there and we were already praying about it. So we were like, I guess we're going. That's kind of like God telling us that's where I want you guys. So
Yeah.
we moved here and I got, mainly involved in real estate biz here to start. I'm a real estate broker. My brokerage company is called Idaho Wild, and then sold a lot of homes and helped a lot of people move to Idaho. A lot of them related to that sending church or family and friends and et cetera, and then reinvested back into the local community. And as things were booming and the price of land was going up and everything and more development and construction, so kind of reinvested the income that we were making here back into the community, and that did well. Then I came across these businesses to purchase. That's all.
Yeah. How
That's
did
the
you
whole
come
story.
across, pardon?
that's a whole, if whenever you're ready for that one, I can get into
Yeah.
that.
Well, how did you come across the Old State Saloon? And then we'll double back and talk about, the events that led you here.
Yeah, so we own an event center nearby, and at that event center, we fixed it up, and we got a lot more bookings for the next year. The event center is on county property, and you can't get in Idaho, you can't get a liquor license for something in county property unless it meets
Mm.
certain, criteria, and it doesn't. So the way that you actually serve alcohol at those events is that you get a bar to get a 1 day permit for each and every event that happens at that event center in the county area. So when we fixed things up and did better marketing, we got a whole bunch of bookings, and I thought to myself, especially being a police officer previously, I wanted to be able to control the service level. I wanted to be able to control the safety better rather than having all these outside bars that we had no control over. I thought, hey, if I go buy a bar, then we can use our own bar. And then, of course, hopefully getting to that point of profitability with that too. So I started walking around to the bars close to me, and I walked into the gathering place is what it was called, and talked to the owner Bill and said, "Are you interested in selling?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm interested in selling. Come on back tomorrow." So I did. We made a deal, and then I bought it.
Wow.
Its location is very unique. It's right there in downtown. It's got a storied history. It's just got this feel to it that makes you excited to think about the history and things that happened in that building and on that street, Old State Street. I have people telling me stories about coming in as a kid and buying things all the time. After it ended up being that bar that I purchased, it became much more important, or I felt much more driven for it to be something truly special for Eagle. And so I put a lot of effort into, remodeling the front of it and opening to the public. And it wasn't just a place to fulfill the need for an event center anymore. It was much more of its own very important place and location in my mind.
Yeah, I can sense that. I've been there a few times at some of your events and for coffee or lunch, and it appears that the people of the community have embraced it wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I think it's a love-hate relationship.
I
Love-hate.
guess if they're, I guess if the people I've met in there, they've embraced it. But yeah, talk about who hasn't and what the love hate
It's
relationship is.
Yeah, and that's a long conversation, but
Yeah,
uh, we mostly everybody is in support, because we really live in an area where there's just a lot of constitutional conservative type of people, and so when we, as a company, started to speak out, boldly supporting constitutional conservative Christian ideas, that's not normal, especially for a
mm,
bar, for a saloon to do that. So my theory has been like, I'm just, enough is enough. So whatever I'm doing, I'm just going to boldly proclaim truth and Christ crucified, and I'm just going for it. And that's all I want in life, is truth and to glorify God. So when you boldly proclaim those things, people are going to be very excited about getting behind you, or they're going to very much hate that you're promoting that. So
yeah,
we do have some people who are, far more on the left wing side or liberal side of things. And they're a minority for sure in Idaho, in this area. However, no matter what I do, those people will just try to tear it apart and malign it, or just associate it with violent, disgusting things, or post horrible things, and badmouth me and badmouth the business. That's just part of like stepping up, and for
yeah,
anything in public for that's right and true. You're going to get people that don't like you. You're going to get enemies
yeah.
that don't want you to succeed. So there's been some of that type of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and I've seen some of that, and you see it nationally, you see it globally. It seems like over the last handful of years, uh, referring back to your move to Idaho and other people's move, I've talked to a number of other people. It seems like the world and the United States has kind of shaken things up and put people in the groups that they were always in, but maybe didn't out vocally express it or wanted to be in. And it's which is good and bad. I mean, it's nice to know who is like-minded with yourself, but it also does polarize humanity and the people in America. So that's the downside that I see, because it's like, oh, you're in this camp, I'm in this camp, and I feel that divides us. But it definitely has done a lot of shifting. The people I talk to from California, the conservative Californians, you know, from an Idaho standpoint, sometimes you talk to California and you find they move from California, you're like, oh, great, are we going to get a liberal? But then you talk to them and you're like, no, we've always been conservative. And we have, in many ways, Mark, I find that sometimes those conservative Californians are deeper conservative than Idaho conservatives. It's wild to talk to a California who has a deeper conviction to conservative values. It's kind of mind blowing, and it wakes Idahoans up. And again, that's why I like to talk to people who have experienced life in California, because I think you guys have a valuable message to share to quote unquote sleepy Idahoans who have, not had to really deal with the things that are happening politically, in our lifetime. I mean, you came from that polar opposite, you
Yeah,
know.
totally opposite. As I'm listening to one of my chickens squawk outside, I don't know if you can hear it, but
I can't.
oh, okay. So, but yeah, that's what's happening right now. Yeah, no, I hear you. So a lot of people that I help move here, and probably this is because I'm also pretty outspoken about, where I stand on things, online. But I've only worked with people who are pretty conservative when they're moving here, relocating here, and they're
Mm,
they're wanting to come here to escape. But I would say that a lot of people, myself included, when I first got here for a few years, and I've been here 6.5 years now, but when I first got here, I felt very safe and in a way, I can put my feet up and not worry too much about politics because we're a deep red state. And I have learned that that is not the case.
yeah.
And if you look at the lessons of Colorado and some other states that have gone from, a strong conservative red to blue, and the process of switching, and the really deceptive ways that the left um, makes that happen. So I think it's super important for people to be aware of things. Like ranked choice voting, which is on our ballot. I strongly feel like people should be voting no on that. We don't want that because that was one of the strategies to get more of not the type of representation we would want, I would say.
Right.
So leave the voting the way it is. But yeah, you have the rhinos, and the really important election is the election that happens, in May, or is it April or May or whatever? Yeah. And so the primaries, that determines who gets the R next to their name in November. And so whoever gets the R next to their name in Idaho is going to win pretty much. And so the real race happened between the two people that were looking for the Republican nomination back in May. And I don't think most people moving
Yeah.
here quite understand what a true battle that actually is,
Mhm.
and how important that is. There's just not enough people aware of that and going out and voting for the person that is truly the constitutional conservative.
Yeah. And I find that too. I was not involved with politics. Growing up in Idaho, a little stint in Utah, but growing up in Idaho, I mean, like you said, put your feet up and kick back and live the good life, right? Until the blue wave comes closer and closer. Like you said, Colorado, I'm paying very close attention to what's happening in Arizona. Or excuse me, the blue wave comes and it's like, okay, this is an all hands on deck kind of a moment, because you don't want to lose the freedoms and the people are friendly. We all get along in these states, and when it starts to polarize people, what I've noticed is people wake up when it gets scary enough or painful enough. I noticed that. And that's why, trying to wake up sleepy Idahoans that are in kickback mode, so to speak, is somewhat challenging. What does it feel like to live under a Californian political, spectrum, day to day in your business and your personal life? I mean, because to us, to me, it looks pretty tyrannical. When you have lockdowns for almost a whole year, and mask mandates and all these different things. What does that feel like to live under that kind of a
Well,
regime?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad I wasn't there for that. I
Yeah,
wasn't there for that what happened with COVID and everything. I think that if I had been, I probably I don't know. I mean, if I was still working as a police officer, I probably would have been fired.
yeah.
I mean, I'm not, I recognized the whole thing as being deceptive, and I'm not saying people didn't get sick. I'm not saying that, but there's deceptive reasons for that whole thing and purposeful. And to go along with that at that point means that I'd be playing a part of a deception. So, what happened in the cities is an example of, people that kind of hold the puppet strings in the world being able to control the most amount of people because they're geologically crammed into one place. And if you start making these um, laws or rules or whatever you want to call them, and then everybody starts to obey them and then telling on each other when they're not, and not recognizing that we the people that live under the Constitution, not local rules that people on some board feel like making up that are going to take away our rights. It's just outrageous. But we saw the example of that happening in cities, and most of the people pretty much complying with everything and believing all of the rhetoric and nonsense.
Hmm.
So I'm a big proponent of freedom, and we need to be constantly fighting for our freedom. I think that's the big lesson
Yeah.
out of what happened, and I think people are waking up, which
They
is good
are.
because
I mean, yeah, and that is the benefit, of what happened. I think that wake up curve is coming on at different people. Even now, I think the waking up, it will be interesting if you never really know where you stand or how much people woke up until something like that happens again, or until they try to push another type of, whether it's pandemic or whatever. But that'll be the $100,000 question, at the next time, if because they'll do it again, I'm sure. Yeah.
yeah, I
S-
don't, and I think there's a lot more people are at that point where they won't just simply
yeah.
obey
Yeah.
orders just because they're given, or because the media says they should.
Yeah. Well, and I'm one of them, when from my perspective, when 2020 happened, I was like, I know you guys are up to something. I just don't know what it is, but feeling safe in Idaho. I almost felt like I was in a cocoon in Idaho, and it wasn't until I started realizing, oh, there are for those same forces at work even in Idaho, and a couple other events happened in Boise, and woke me up big. But still, it does take some digging and some, especially, from my standpoint of being not political prior, et cetera, it does take some digging and some peeling of the layers. And I find that a lot of people don't want to invest that time to actually look into what's going on, do some critical thinking. But regardless, that's neither here nor there. But I appreciate you sharing your experience in California, because it's so vital to people living in Idaho, because of, like you said, the way I look at the liberal agenda is that they are so well funded and well organized, and they are an effective machine at pushing those ideas. And conservatives tend to be like live and let live, and not well organized. Speaking like what you said with Idaho politics, I mean, in many ways, I'm just as frustrated with Republicans and conservatives as I am with liberals, because conservatives are like, well, they're disorganized. You try to go to, Republican events in Idaho, and they get canceled for whatever reasons. It's what's been your experience, talking with other conservatives, and like what you feel the movement there is, because we need to have the resistance. We need to have a duality to make, conscious forward progress. You know.
Yeah, we are waking up. We have 4 events next week that are politically related. And the one of them that actually has tickets, it's sold out in a day and a half. That was
Wow.
the Idaho GOP event, the Trump night. So that'll be a lot of fun. But so I do think that there's more people paying attention to these things. I think the word's getting out. What you have is you have people who are kind of just working hard in life, and they're in that, like, I'm building my career mode, or I'm got my kids and I'm bringing them to these events and sports and church and all the things that we're involved with on a daily basis. And it's just a bit daunting for those folks who are in the busyness of life. And I speak, a lot of just about with people with kids, and just doing that for them to try to think about paying attention to politics is like a leap. So I think that that's okay. They just need to find a group or somebody that they trust to do all the research and everything for them, and then, provide the short bullet points of what was found, in the different people running or the different legislation that's on the ballot, and have a recommendation for something that is, the most truly constitutional, conservative, and for me, Christian idea to vote for.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is the major challenge is people are busy. Like you say, they've got a lot of things on their plate and they just don't have time to, other than, maybe catch a mainstream article. But I do think that's a huge hurdle to get over, but it's looking promising. Let's double back and talk about your faith and how it intermingles with your business structure. It feels to me like, based on what I've heard of your story so far, you've had some experiences that feel a little bit faith driven or serendipitous, if you will, moving here and acquiring businesses. I mean, talk about your journey and how your faith intermingles with your entrepreneurship.
Yeah, so we did move here. Really, one of the main reasons we moved here was to help plant a church from Southern California here, and it started here on on our property in our shop, and we were
Mm,
meeting on Sundays, and we weren't. I'm not anybody that was like paid on staff or anything like that. We were just people that moved to help support the plant, the church plant. And so yeah, that was a big, it's always a big part of our lives, and we served to help grow that over the last 6 years, 6.5 years or so. And for me, I've really witnessing the amount of deception that's going on in the world, and I tie that back to, biblically speaking, Satan, and he's basically the father of lies, the great deceiver. And so you look at Satan's tactics. He likes to put people in high places that are going to do his bidding. And so I think we live in a world where you're looking at that kind of play out. And so the deceptions are coming top down. And it's more and more evident to me. And the way that God kind of wired me up is to be somebody who's kind of relentlessly pursuing the truth, and finding the deception and shining light on it. And I don't expect everybody to have that drive. I think when I sit down and I think about reaching people for Christ or the gospel message, I always tend to think, how can I reach, 5 million people? Meanwhile, my wife is like, helping somebody that's there right in front of her that I'm not seeing, because I'm thinking about how to, but we need both types of people. If you understand what I mean, you need
yeah.
those people who are making big plans and things. And then you need like the people who are ministering, that are really good at ministering and loving on the real actual people that are in front of them. And that's not to say that I don't love helping individual people too. I do. It's just the way my mind tends to go is on bigger ideas. But so yeah, we moved here, and I, just seeing more and more deception in the world and even in the church and everything. And it's a constant battle. And I think the church is waking up, but it's also coming out of decades of really kind of being weak and apathetic.
Yeah.
And there's some reasons why that's happening, or has happened. And it's just this mindset of the church really kind of not being involved in the political things. And I am very much against that. And you can say like, hey, the church shouldn't be involved in politics, but really, I don't look at it like church being involved in politics. I look at it like church being involved in keeping a society that has morality,
Yeah.
or a church being involved in identifying evil and trying to stop that evil. You can't do those things without being involved in politics.
Yeah.
So as the saints who make up the church, we ought to be shining light on deception and evil and all those things, and spending our time constantly discerning between good and evil, as the end of Hebrews chapter 5 says. We have to be doing that. We have to discern between good and evil, and shine light and expose those things. If the church is sleeping, which is what has happened for decades and decades and decades, we wind up with a world where we have men, half naked, dressed as women, sitting in libraries reading books to children. And that's now the world we live in,
Yeah.
because the church has been basically head down, kind of just doing their church thing at church, and not sending people out to get on those different boards, health boards, school boards, running for office, legislating. If we're not legislating, Satan's legislating. And that means we're going to have rules and laws come into place that are evil. And so I think I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful. And I feel like it's happening. There's people waking up in the church and saying, hey, look, we ought not to exclude ourselves from politics in the world. We have an obligation to. We don't live in a society where there's one evil king and we're supposed to just obey the orders of that king. We live in a society that's made of we the people and the Constitution. And so we have an obligation, since we're given an amazing gift of freedom and the Constitution that protects those freedoms. We the people have an obligation, biblically speaking, to be good stewards of that gift, and to step up and play a role in we the people government. That we haven't done, and I feel like we're waking up, and things are going to start getting better.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're probably right that many people in the church have realized the frog in hot water scenario that they find themselves in, because of this whole separation of church and state. And they've kind of, like I said, it goes back to, I think the left is very well organized and very intelligent. I give them a lot of respect because they've been able to turn and shift the American culture over, like you said, decades into the situation we find ourselves now. And COVID was a blessing and a curse. People woke up and was like, wow, where are we living? I mean, is this, some communist country, or it was so wild, but it did wake a lot of people up.
Yeah, and I think I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but separation of church and state is not really a thing, the way
Yeah.
that the left argues that it is. And
Yeah.
so really to keep the government out of interfering with the church. And you can't keep the church out of the government because, people are who they are. And if you're bringing your Christian
Mhm.
beliefs to the government, you don't check them at the door. Our country, and I know they like to argue against this too, but our country was founded on Christian principles 100%.
Yeah.
And so we need to keep those going, otherwise we're gonna lose the country.
Yeah. Well, and a person like myself who, not only was I not really political prior to COVID times, but I also wasn't really involved in religious or spiritual or religious in church. But what happens is I think I speak for a number of people. If the world's going to put you, if certain things are going to happen in the world, you're going to go to the side that you feel more aligned with. And I think a lot of people like me were maybe in the middle and were like, okay, I'm not going to the left because I don't understand I don't understand their thinking. It was funny when Joe Biden won the election. I've always been a conservative my whole life. When Joe Biden won the election, I literally thought to myself, as a person who wants to be integrated with the United States and be a good citizen, I thought maybe the left knows something I don't know. And after about 2 months, I was like, no, they're crazy. I cannot understand what's going on here. So of course, I'm
Yeah.
conservative, but I go to the people that resonate with my values and my principles, and that happens to be the Christian right. I don't agree with everything that they agree with, but certainly more so there than the left. And I think a lot of people are like me. You're going to go to the camp that you're, most value aligned with.
Yeah, agreed, 100%.
Hmm.
I don't have much more to add to that, but 100% agree with you.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting what's happening in the United States. Well, let's talk on about some of the things that you're doing at the Old State Saloon. I went to a fantastic talk with the ex-gang member Peter Velasquez or Vasquez.
Yes.
Phenomenal. Um, So let's talk about what you're doing there and also where people can watch those events that aren't able to go to them live on the web.
Well, at the moment, not on Facebook since they just completely took our site down,
I noticed that. Yeah,
which we
it's so let's talk about that for a moment. What was the reason they gave, or did they give a reason?
so I got an email that just said the page has been suspended for violating community standards, and
Shoot.
that's it.
So you don't
There
know
was
what
no way to
post
appeal.
or you don't know what
Oh,
potentially did it?
well, I think, yeah, I mean, after looking and diving into some things, I think we found out that one of the groups or people who totally hates us related to the Heterosexual Awesomeness Month, they spam reported us as being terrorists
Hmm.
related to some posts regarding a gun giveaway that we did.
Hmm.
So I guess if you get enough people, probably the system shut down the page for safety concerns or something based off the amount of people who were reporting
Hmm.
terrorism, I guess,
Yeah.
which is pretty outrageous. And I'm looking into getting that back, and we'll see what happens there. I got a couple of people working on that. But yeah, so we are doing a lot of events there, and it's what I want is a place where people can come and engage in conversation that they wouldn't normally otherwise have. And it seems as though the people who do are looking into truth and having conversations are more so doing them from behind a glowing screen and not having that real thing happen. And this is interesting, and a whole different tangent we can get on. But the more we go deeper into technology and artificial intelligence, the more real space events matter. And so we've been, since we opened our doors, been pushing real space events that are, people coming together, not to watch a football game. And that's fine if you like to go watch football games, but to come together to listen to an idea presented to them and then engage in meaningful conversation about that idea in a real place. The more AI gets stronger, the more you can't trust what you're seeing on the screen. And like I was watching a few days ago, Ian Carroll posted, this is the end of cat videos, because 2024, after 2024, people will no longer know if the cat video that they're watching is real or not,
Hmm.
because you can have AI create a very funny cat video, and we've always enjoyed funny cat videos to take 5 seconds to watch them because cats do the funniest things sometimes. But after, we're just getting to that point where nobody knows what's real. And so I think, as a community, people are going to be grabbing onto and holding tightly onto things that they're convinced are real, and that means real space events are going to become more valuable, more of a meaningful experience to people. So yeah, we do those, and we also record them and push them out online. And I encourage people to do the same at their local restaurant or bar or library or whatever. Or they can watch our live event, and the nice thing about watching a live event in front of a live audience is that you're watching something that's more real. It just seems like it's a more real, unique thing when you have a live audience there. And the audience is able to ask any questions they want or question the presenter, even if they disagree. I mean, these are things that are totally fine. Any presenter that presents the Old State Saloon has to be willing to open up to questions from the audience. And so when you get all that together, to me, I feel like we're preserving sanity, we're preserving reality, and we're helping people re-engage into learning civil discourse, into relearning how to communicate with each other, to have a meaningful conversation where they're looking in each other's eyes, and hear the inflection and tone and the way that people are holding themselves. And I think that is going to become more and more valuable as the AI and all that stuff becomes more real. We have somebody coming at the end of the month to do 4 presentations on AI, the rise of the robots, and then a couple other topics, but it's all technology related. And one of them is actually, I don't know what title we're going with, but it's AI and the spirituality
Mm.
of it, and how that, you know, AI could be used for evil, and there's an arguable spirituality behind it. So that'll be very interesting, and I'm sure we'll prompt several interesting conversations. But those are
Yeah.
the type of things we're doing.
Well, it seems like you're really going right to the heart of, real world potential problems or situations, and it seems like looking at your event schedule moving forward, and like I said, the Peter Velasquez thing, these are right on target about, you're touching a good spot, I guess, in what people I think need. Talk about, okay, so we know your Facebook is currently, MIA, but talk about where people can, like I say, if they can't come live, which obviously I agree with you is the best experience. But before I ask you this question, let me just share my experience going to your saloon. It felt when I met, I've met a couple different people there. I talked to a couple there, and you're talking openly about, the state of the world, the state of Idaho, California. These couple moved from California, and it almost felt a little bit like, should we be talking about this stuff? When you're talking about conservative values, it's like, living in a political correct, growing up in politically correct United States and that frog in hot water syndrome, you kind of think it feels so freeing. It feels so good to be able to talk openly about the values that you hold with another person. If you had other people mention this to you, I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels free to
Oh,
speak
yeah,
freely there.
all the time, all the time. And I think another great deception that is out there is that you don't bring religion and politics into a bar, which is so funny because the pubs is like where people back,
Yeah.
you know, before entertainment, television, all that stuff, that's where they met to talk
Yeah.
about important things. And so I feel like it's a purposeful deception to have these places where that used to be meaningful places are now turned into, you do not talk about anything meaningful in here. That's like the rule. You're not allowed to. That's people literally say that, or there's even signs up in bars that say no religion or politics
Oh,
here.
really? Wow.
Yeah, if you haven't noticed that, it's like it's a thing where
Yeah.
it's kind of mind blowing. And then instead, we're supposed to be like dumb ourselves down and just watch, like, you know, overpaid. Well, I'm not going to bash NFL. Well, you know, we're supposed
But
to.
I get you. Yeah, the bread and circuses, and talk
Yes,
about what they want us to talk about, the mainstream, right? I mean, which is in my mind has led to, and I'm just as guilty in many ways, with movies and entertainment and music, but I think it's led to this, partially led to the state that we're in our country, where we're, not talking about the important things, we're talking about the conjured up things.
right.
Yeah, but that's interesting. You mentioned the bar situation. It almost seems like you said, yeah, reading history of the United States, like you said, these meetings were held in the bar, important topics about our country were held in the bar. Do you think that? And clearly alcohol was a part of the situation there, and they formed countries that we became we had the seeds of a great nation started in bars. Why do you think bars now, and the alcohol that surrounds them is kind of demonized and as a problem? I mean, I have my own ideas, but I'd love to hear um your your take on that, you know?
Well, that's a multifaceted thing there. You have a lot of different angles. I have people, you know, come at me who are strong Christian, biblical, or professing strong Christian, biblical people who say, "How dare you be a Christian and say you're Christian and have a bar?" And you know, I'll preface that by saying we serve food.
Yeah.
Um, so you know, what's so funny is, like, it's a restaurant. A Christian can own a restaurant that has alcohol in it, and that's not a problem to these folks. But then
Yeah.
if you own if you own a bar and it doesn't have food, it's a problem. But we actually do have food, and we're building a full kitchen, so it'll be like a official restaurant here in the future. But yeah, so the bar, you know, Satan wants evil things to happen. Alcohol certainly lowers inhibitions for people. There's the saying, man has a drink, the drink has a drink, and then the drink has the man. And that's the process of getting to the point of drunkenness, which, I'm very much against drunkenness. Watching it, in my lifetime as a police officer, and I was an accident investigator for 5 years, and how many scenes of, mangled and dead people or seriously injured people that I've seen pulling up to those accidents. That's very serious, and it's something that I'm against. However, I'm also against having sex outside of marriage, but that doesn't mean sex is bad. I'm also against overeating, but that doesn't mean food is bad. So it's taking something that God gave us as a gift and abusing that gift, and that is where it becomes evil and sinful. Alcohol is something that is a gift for people to use and enjoy together. To share a drink together is a special time that you can have. And certainly it can be coffee, or it can be, a soda or whatever. But alcohol has a tendency just to relax and put you in a conversational mood. It's great for celebrations. Biblically speaking, all these things happen. Jesus' first miracle in the wedding in Cana was to create the wine, and that was for celebration. So there's a lot of wonderful things that alcohol can be used for. Why I don't know why it's demonized so much. I mean, a lot of bad stuff happens because of it, I guess, is
Yeah.
because people abuse it. But a lot of bad stuff happens because people abuse sex, and a lot of
Yeah.
stuff happens because people abuse, overindulgence of food and other things too.
Yeah.
So
Well, from my perspective, it almost seems like as the state of our country kind of goes into decline and gets corrupted by these ideas that are not in alignment with God's plan and not in alignment with the goodness, it seems like people turn to all those things that aren't inherently bad in and of themselves, alcohol, sex, pornography, as an outlet because our country's not right and people aren't right, and they use these things as vices. Then that's kind of what it seems like to me, and then they get demonized. Okay, that's a bad thing. When, like you said, it's it's all here created by God. That's kind of my perspective of it. What do you think about that?
yeah, I think it's decades of media pushing more and more evil as being normal. It starts out as a joke or funny, and
Hmm.
then suddenly it keeps slipping into mainstream as something that's more normal, whatever the topic is. And then suddenly it's everybody it has access to marijuana, whereas back to a certain amount of decades ago it would have been, I mean, felonious basically, and
Hmm.
pretty much everybody would have thought so.
Yeah.
Or you have the subject of gay marriage, and whereas 30 years ago, even the most liberal people would not have been thinking that we were going to have gay marriage type of stuff
Yeah.
happening, because marriage was between a man and woman. And so, which direction does that go? Is that continue on where you have, you know, multiple people getting married, more than two? Just where do things like that end? And so, yes, so I think it's just the slow introduction of these things, and putting alcohol in there. Undoubtedly, it takes people's inhibitions down, and that could lead more easily into sinful activities. And I mean, there's a lot of people, if they would not have used alcohol or abused alcohol, would have a much different life, a
Yeah.
lot of regret because of alcohol. I get that. I understand that. I don't promote that in any way. I don't want anybody overindulging, overusing alcohol at
Hmm.
Old State. Is it going to happen? Yeah, it's going to happen. People make their own choices, and that's there's no way we could completely stop all of that. But
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. All right. So doubling back to where people can find you that aren't
yes,
able to go to your live events. No, I've interjected a number of different tangents in. Um, so talk about what channels and sources you have now, and also what you're looking at in the future to spread your message. Because I being an entrepreneur and being a person who has a strong inspiration to spread this gospel, so to speak. Talk about what you've got and what you see for the future, uh, virtually or
Yeah.
online.
So at the moment, I think the best place for everybody to go would be X.com, formerly Twitter. That's, we're going to have all of our events, or not all, but a lot of our events will be live broadcast on X at Old State Saloon. And I'm also there as Old State Mark to follow me personally. We also are now going live on Rumble. You just look up Old State Saloon on Rumble. And we have Old State Saloon Cast for our events that we push out on video. We're basically calling that or labeling that Old State Saloon Cast. We previously had a different brand we were running our events under. However, to keep things a little bit more simple, and because of what happened in Heterosexual Awesomeness Month, we're kind of running everything under Old State brand. And anything that's distributed as information from a presenter or anything like that, or on a podcast that we do, because we're kind of launching into our own podcast under that Old State Saloon Cast. You can see that at salooncast.com. We'll bring you right to the spot for those types of things. Or you can look at the individual places, X or Rumble. We're going to try to be on YouTube. But we've already had a few videos get kicked off of there pretty quickly, especially vaccine related videos that we had some doctors in talking about vaccines. Was interesting. They didn't even make it through being loaded up onto YouTube
Really?
before they were. Yeah.
I
So
saw that. I saw that you had some doctors. I didn't go to that one or attend that one, but are you, because it almost seems like I got a strike on YouTube in 2021, 22 talking about MASKS, and
mhm.
of course I was terrified because it's my baby. This is my business, right? And so, as I'm sure you were, so were those videos flagged recently, probably within the last few
This
months or
year,
so? This
this year,
year.
yeah. I
Really?
think that was in what, I don't know, March or April. And then we just decided to start be loading things on Rumble.
Yeah.
At the moment, so we're catching up. We have a lot of content that we're going to be pushing out, and I've got somebody starting full time on the social media part that's going to be helping push that out. But and then we're trying to pull little snippets of all that content for the highlights for people to see. But yeah, I'm excited about growing that audience. For me, the bigger audience we can grow, we're just going to keep inviting people to come speak, and we're gonna bring forth these ideas, much of which is like just kind of truth for people to consider. Others ideas are like questioning that. I don't tell anybody you shall believe this. This is 100% the way things are. I encourage people to ask questions about everything, even the stuff that I'm pretty certain about. I would say, hey, look, you got to go through your own process of asking questions. For me, that means bring it to scripture and make sure it jives with scripture, God's word, and then go from there. But I'm at a point in life. All I want is truth. I know there's massive deception, and there's no way that I'm going to pretend like I have figured everything out. No way.
Yeah.
Anybody anybody who thinks that, man, I think that you're in a dangerous position to be deceived at a later time. Whereas if you are learning how to question and discern between good and evil and lies and truth, you're going to be in a much better position should a very large deception end up presenting itself down the road.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. I feel the same way. The reason I started speaking out, and the reason I was called and inspired to speak out is I saw people under the influence of government and media, and I was like, we have a major problem. I want people to be under their own influence and their own inner guidance system, and like you said, their own discernment. When the government and media captures attentions of a lot of my fellow human beings, I'm like, you guys, we have a major problem. And as uncomfortable as it is for me to speak out and maybe polarize or offend you, it's worth it because we have this problem, So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, but we as people who are taking in information, you have to constantly be discerning because news is very much to me because of where I get my news, it's decentralized. So we have individuals or groups that are putting out information. And I'm thankful for them and their research. But you have to remember at any point in time, somebody can become compromised, I guess I could
Yeah.
say. And that could be because of money, or it could be because they were caught doing something and now, they're being blackmailed. So even something that you've relied on as being something that you trust for years any point in time could turn a different direction and start slipping in things that are purposefully not true. So it's not fun to know that we live in a world where you constantly have to be figuring out and most of the time I just say like, I don't know for sure what's true, but
Hmm.
I'm glad to know the information one way or another,
Right.
what people are presenting or thinking or whatever else. And it's just a really healthy position to be in to put, and it doesn't bother me. I think it bothers people. They just want to pick something and say this is truth,
Yeah.
and they feel better.
Check the box and move on or get back to, like they say, the daily lives, right?
They feel more comfortable that way. And I don't know, I guess with the gift of faith, for me, I have the rock of knowing that Christ is truth. And I know people can say that's fake or whatever, man-made nonsense. But and I do realize there is a faith there, but there's also a lot of evidence and witness evidence and everything else for Christ and the Creator. And I think that the Creator is really written into our DNA, into our code of understanding that there actually is a creator. And the more you look at that DNA, the more you realize, oh, wow, there has to be a
Yeah.
creator. But for these things, like that's my one truth that I can always come back to as something that makes me feel comfortable, even though all the rest of this stuff, there's no way I could possibly know all the truth that's going on out there.
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. Yeah, it does. There are layers, and I tell people, as well. My understanding or what I believe to be true about certain things, it changes frequently as time goes on. Sometimes weekly, I'll be like, okay, I have a different understanding or a different insight to what's going on in this area or this person. But yeah, I just tell people too, as long as you're, at least on the path of wanting to know truth and using your discernment. But what I'm finding is a lot of people, Americans, because of the bread and circuses, because of the distractions they've got, that muscle almost it hasn't been used in so long, the critical thinking muscle or the discernment, that it's kind of dormant, but I think it's coming back online for a lot of people, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to be so surprised by something later that I end up
Yeah.
being shocked or it being able to be deceived because I
Yeah.
believe something for sure is true. I like knowing the different ideas too. I mean, I was talking with somebody today or yesterday about the idea of Trump still being the commander in chief of the Republic of the United States compared to the
Hmm.
corporation of the United States. And I don't think that that's actually, probably not the case, but
Hmm.
I think there's a chance. I mean, we live in a
Yeah.
pretty crazy world, and I think when you dive into the movie that it seems like we're watching and the corporation documents of the United States, and then like all those strange things that have happened with Trump and his
Hmm.
executive orders and those things being extended and the way that he seems to be sort of like this commander in chief while he's not actually the president of the United States. It's very very interesting things. Do I believe
Yeah.
any of it is like actually true? No, not really.
Yeah.
But I suppose there's a small chance it's possible.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
it's just
and
like one example.
yeah, and that's a great example. Like, I think it's good for people to be able to entertain an idea that in many cases, if it's totally foreign to what you believe. That's why I like to listen to left-wing talk shows. And I can't sometimes wrap my mind around their thought process, but I want to hear what they're saying. I mean, they're human beings. I want to get the perspective. It's good to entertain ideas that are outside of our level of awareness or what we have been studying. I think it's healthy.
Yeah, on that note, I would just add like, for the liberalism that's happening today, it's flat out evil. And so
Yeah,
I think
I
people who
agree.
stand for what's right they need to be bold enough. We need to be bold enough to call it what it is. I mean, if you are for having no boundaries on our southern border and just having people come through, that is flat out evil. And
Yeah.
if you do not know, I mean, it's just widely known that there's a tremendous amount of trafficking happening as a result of having those open borders. And what's going on with those children and women and everything that are being trafficked is horrendous. And then to allow all of these military age males to come into our country during such a time where nobody knows what's going on, this is like flat out just evil. This is a way,
Yeah.
this is like clearly a strategy to take down a country. And if
Yeah.
you are a liberal that wants to vote for that, you are voting for our country to be taken down. And that's flat out like you're a traitor as far
Yeah.
as I'm concerned. There is
Yeah.
no like, there's no like, oh, I totally, I mean, I respect human beings because they're made in God's image. But if you are a liberal who is for these liberal left-wing ideas, that is flat out evil. And people need to start calling it what it is and not be afraid to do so. I
Yeah.
mean, they get their messaging from, Project Mockingbird to start calling everybody weird or whatever. So
Hmm.
my message is to, call evil what it is and just be bold about doing that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Like I say, doubling back to what I see. I mean, I'm very conscious about what's happening in New York and California and Seattle and Portland, because I know those trends come, and I do try to wrap my mind around the thought process. It's almost like they're not connecting the dots of their ideology and the supporting of those political people that push those ideology, and then the real world results of their cities. And so I'll be honest with you, I do have my eye on global where I want to go if and when I need to pull the chute, because one thing that COVID woke me up was, and again, getting involved in some local issues that, regarding the upzone in Boise and certain things, it's all tied into these bigger plans that we all know about. I saw that I'm not going to, try to fight a losing battle. If there comes a point where I need to withdraw and get out of the US, I'm coming to terms with that. I don't want to have to do that. But yeah, like you said, it's if you can't reason with the person, and if they can't understand why things are happening to them and that ideas are causing them, there's really no saving America, quite frankly. What are your thoughts on this liberal mindset that just doesn't seem? I mean, they're destroying their own cities. They're facing, even some of them that are victims of violent crime in their own cities are not connecting those dots. What's your thoughts about that?
Yeah, for a couple things. First, I think that it's exaggerated how many people are actually liberal and believe those things. They have control of the mainstream media and are pushing, the normalcy or trying to have us feel like, or, kind of succumb to this messaging that all
Mm,
of these ideas are normal and we're the abnormal or
yeah.
evil ones or racist
Make
ones
us feel
or
conspiracy or dumb or whatever. Yeah.
bigots. The names that we get called for simply wanting to protect our country from people invading across borders
Hmm.
is it's kind of outrageous that we're going from traitors basically taking down our country to us being called racist for wanting to protect our country, which is crazy. So I think that there's definitely a misunderstanding of how many people feel a certain way. I don't believe any of those polls. I believe they're all just, you put money
Trumped up. Yeah.
involved.
Just, yeah.
Yeah,
Kind of a fake news. Yeah. Yeah.
just to get people to think that, you know, in this instance, if we actually have an election with Trump and Kamala, to think that she's actually close.
Hmm.
So they go and vote, and then there's no doubt in my mind that Trump won 2020. People can call me crazy, but I've
I
seen nothing.
agree. Yeah, I mean,
And then
it was mind blowing to me too. I was shocked, but yeah, yeah, I do agree with you that it's hard to know, uh, because the media is left and they're going to promote this narrative. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, but I just look at these cities and it's kind of heartbreaking, quite frankly. These were, California was used to be conservative, and they created this massive economic engine. New York, same thing, and it's now just kind of imploding on itself. It's so wild to watch. It's sad.
yeah, I actually think some of those states are still conservative. I just feel like it's the CIA has learned how to manipulate elections.
Yeah. 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 Well, this has been awesome, Mark. Let me just see what else I have here for you. So I will leave links to all of your social media in different places so people to find out uh, how to find you. But it looks like the future's bright for Old State Saloon, and you're moving full speed ahead. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate. We're looking to build on and grow and do more there physically, as far as a restaurant serving like local healthy food. I was talking with somebody today, like we're actually going to have local eggs from local chickens, instead of these bleached, disgusting eggs that you find in the grocery store. I know far too much about the supply chain, and there's just no way that I would serve the disgusting food that is in our supply chain to people at a restaurant that I own. So we can look forward to that. We're definitely pushing forward with doing things online. We're taking what we're doing in a real place and pushing that out online. So that'll be good. And there's going to be some stuff coming up with some different kind of like showing people how much like we're being attacked basically, and
Hmm.
it's from different angles. And so we're trying to put together how to tell that story properly. And I think weight raising the awareness of that is certainly not to scare people away from stepping up and doing something, but we need to be aware that when people do step up, they need support, whether it's prayer support or just stopping by and getting a coffee or a beer or something at Old State Saloon, rather than going to, some, yeah, I don't say the name of some big chain, national chain company.
Hmm.
Drive by the chain. But what I'm saying is support local, essentially, is what I'm saying. And
Yeah.
especially if they're people who are standing up for what's right and true and they're like-minded people, we need to support them and their businesses. So I kind of want to bring a little bit of attention to some of the things that are happening, which I think are going to be quite surprising for people, in some instances, to, what's happening and how we're kind of being attacked, on multiple fronts. But
Well,
so stay tuned for some information about that coming up. And then also we're about ready to show, everybody, or a lot of people made fun of the Cybertruck that I was in line 5 years for, and it
hmm.
just got wrapped. So everybody will see
Oh,
that the
really?
wrap.
So you get a new,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. So you got a new wrap on your Cybertruck. You're gonna be sharing that on social media, and
Yeah, which is, by the way, I don't know, it's arguably the most American made car out there right now. So, which I know people will fight on that too.
I
But
didn't know. Yeah, I don't know much about it. I know a little bit about the Cybertruck, but so talk more about that.
it's a pretty cool, fun vehicle. I call it the most remarkable production vehicle on the road. To
Hmm.
drive it is, really, it's different, and it's a really a joy to drive it. But anyways, it's called the Old State Freedom Truck now, and it's got this wrap that's patriotic. And then
Cool.
we're hoping to get a mount system and get a Gatling gun for a day and go out and, with a
Cool.
YouTuber locally, and get some cool videos and things like that. But it's a fun vehicle, and we're going to use it for advertising, and then also pulling some tap trailers for events and things that we do in the future.
Cool. Sounds like you got a lot of cool things going on there. And you're I don't know. It seems, are you the brainchild behind all these, or do you have a team coming up with the events and the speakers? I mean, who's creating these things? It's awesome what you're doing there.
Yeah, mostly, and it's like a double-edged sword, right? So I feel like I should probably hire somebody part-time to like tell me to stop.
Mm. To kind of
Hey,
put the
too
brakes on a
many
little bit, or
too
you
many
think?
ideas here. Yeah. So, and I know I've got wonderful friends who work with me on all these things, and for everything that we end up doing, there's probably three or four things that came to mind that we decided was not a good idea. So,
Hmm.
uh, and yeah, so I have to learn too to kind of hold back, because in order to actually accomplish something, ideas, like there's plenty of ideas, but
Yeah.
actually fulfilling those ideas is challenging. And, just looking at like a week we have next week with 4 or 5 events at Old State Saloon. Plus, we're working to serve the alcohol and food for about 5 weddings next week as well.
Wow.
So all of one week is quite a lot for our staff to handle, but we've got a good staff, so I'm
I
pumped.
imagine you'd have to, yeah, to be, pushing this far, this much good information into the world and being a force for good. Yeah, I imagine you do have good staff.
Well, yeah, so we will never stop physically doing the things we do in real space, and I
Mhm.
will never ever stop standing for what's right and true. And so no matter what the gruesome, vile enemies throw our direction, we're going to plow right through. And I will say that I feel very thankful for the many people who do reach out with words of encouragement. I get snail mail from people just encouraging me with cards at least once or twice a week. And I get phone calls and texts and emails, and then just comments online of people in support of the things that we're doing. It means a lot, especially when there's hundreds of the other types of messages coming in and threats and all kinds of things like that. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah, well, you're right. You stand up, especially you stand up against what could be argued as, mainstream ideologies, and yeah, I feel a lot of people are programmed and almost like, NPCs, just like out there, regurgitating what the propaganda machine has told them to regurgitate. It is a wild ride.
Yep, for sure. But we'll keep fighting the good fight, and I appreciate what you're doing too. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, well, like I said, I'm inspired by what you're doing there. I was, happy to, do the piece on your event in June. And I just, like I said, I'm behind you 100%. Like you said, for speaking out against what's happening. Like you said, the deception, the lies, etc. So I appreciate you making time to join me today, and I look forward to seeing what you got coming down in the future.
You bet. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.